I'm Fiona Frank. I am the Project and Outreach Manager for the Scottish Council of Jewish Communities. This is the fourth in a four-part series called Creative Thursday Mornings, which is a very exciting series that we started this month. And we had, what did we have? We had singing, drawing, baking, and now we've got textiles. And I didn't really know what we're going to do for this session. We made a connection with our first speaker, who was going to show us a beautiful piece of work that she did when she first got locked down. And then it grew a little bit because I had a little bit of an introduction to somebody else, and then somebody else, and then it's just completely grown. And now I think we've had, there's 64 people already. I think we had about 100 people have registered, but they're going to be able to see the recording afterwards, people that couldn't come. So it's fabulous to have you all here. So our speakers today are Debbie Taylor, Malcolm Lochhead, and Marsha Gladstone. And we're going to start with Debbie Taylor, who is going to be talking to us about her lockdown quilt and the Aberdeen Mantles. So Jean, please could you spotlight Debbie? The best view to have, the top right of your screen, if you click on speaker view, you should be able to see, everyone should be able to see Debbie now. So over to you.
Okay, morning everybody. Do I need to get closer to my computer, or can everybody hear me? Everybody fine?
Absolutely fine.
Well, okay, super. So welcome to my sewing room. I had been asked to talk about lockdown quilting and the Aberdeen Mantles. So what I've actually done is broken the talk down into 3 sections. I'll give you a bit of an introduction about myself, then I'll talk about the Aberdeen Mantles, and I'll finish with lockdown quilting. And Fiona, if I talk too long, have you got some sort of mechanism for letting me know to shut up? Yes, okay. Right.
I've got a mute button, Debbie.
Fine, so you tell me when you're going to mute me. So, how did I come to be quilting in lockdown, and what is the story of the Aberdeen Mantles? So the story begins about 60 years ago. My grandmothers knitted, my mother knitted, my grandmother sewed, my mother sewed. I was brought up wearing hand knitted sweaters, homemade skirts, homemade dresses. We had a rich variety of homemade items, and I still have my grandmother's patterns. These were the sorts of things that she knitted. And I also have the sweater, the pattern for the sweater that I wore to school and that my brother wore to school, right through from 5 years old to 17 years old. We had hand knitted sweaters for school. So this is what I was brought up with. And by the age of about 6 or 7, I'd learned to knit, and I was doing what is called tapestry. And it was things like this. This is what I was doing. And we had gone to France on holiday, and I had discovered French tapestries and DMC threads. And coming from a place like Dundee, to me, DMC threads and the French tapestries were just really exotic. Absolutely, the colours were magnificent, just nothing that we could get in a shop at home. So I did these tapestries, but I also continued to knit as a child. And we went to Stonehaven when I was 12 years old, and I bought this pattern. And from the age of 12, I knitted Aran sweaters. Everybody in the family had at least 2 Aran sweaters. And the thing about the Ireland sweaters was I liked the designs and I liked the complexity of the designs and the different stitches. I also started doing a bit of embroidery, and I used to embroider things like tablecloths and napkins. You don't tend to see them nowadays, but they were great fun to do as well. And again, it was lovely to play around with colour and to play around with the designs. I actually studied home economics at Duncan of Jordanstone College of Art. And I must say it was a fantastic course, but it really qualified me for nothing other than teaching. And at the time, teaching of home economics was being removed from the curriculum, and getting into teacher training college was very, very difficult. So whilst I was studying home economics, I was knitting for a shop in Edinburgh, and I knitted loads of sweaters whilst I was a student, and they were sold in the shop. I got paid peanuts and they were sold for quite a lot of money. But whilst I studied home economics, it gave me a chance to learn about dress and textiles. And I was able to try out things like gold work and designing patterns. I experimented with screen printing. I did some tailoring. I did some quilting, patchwork, cut work, white work. And I had a wonderful, wonderful lecturer called Pauline Han. And she was convinced that I should go and do textile renovation. She said, go to Manchester, learn the skills. She said, this is what you should do. And what did I do? I packed my bags and I went to Israel. And I spent several years working on kibbutz. And when I was on kibbutz, all I did was knit. I really didn't, I didn't sew at all. However, Israel didn't quite work out, and I landed back in the UK eventually, studied psychiatric nursing, got married, worked in drug services, specialised in working with prostitutes, which meant that my work hours were just crazy, and really didn't do much in terms of textiles. Did a little bit of gold work, a little bit of knitting over the years. I had a sewing machine, so I made curtains for people. And every year at Halloween made a fancy dress outfit, or at Purim made a fancy dress outfit for fancy dress parties or whatever. But what happened during this time was that I actually developed arthritis, which meant that doing hand embroidery, which I had done quite a lot of, was getting more and more difficult, especially holding a needle. So come 2014, by that point, knitting was also quite uncomfortable for me. And I did discover knitting in the round, but my thumbs, both thumbs, are in quite a mess, and I have real difficulty with the needle, and I was taking early retirement. And I thought, I can now go back to doing all the things that I like doing with textiles, but what am I going to do that I can do with my hands? I know, I'll treat myself to a brand new sewing machine that does all sorts of fantastic things and that embroiders as well. And I've got an example here of just a bit of embroidery. That's the sort of thing I can do on my sewing machine. So I can actually design designs on my sewing machine with software. But I can also do quilting. And I can use the machine to do the quilting, so I don't need to do the quilting by hand. My son had moved out the house, which was great. So my sewing room was now used to be my son's bedroom. And since 2014, I've spent most of my spare time, when I'm not doing work for the show, quilting, patchwork and quilting. So what is a quilt? In case you don't know what a quilt is a quilt is something that is made from 3 layers. It can be 3 layers of any fabric, but basically it's a sandwich. You have your top layer, you have your wadding in the middle, and you have a bottom layer. And you put them together in a sandwich, and then you sew, well, you either do it by hand or by machine. You do stitching to ensure that the 3 layers hold together. So you'll also see that I've got here on the fabric some hearts, because I don't just quilt, I also do a technique called applique. And in applique, you can apply shapes to your fabric. And you do that, there's this wonderful stuff called Bondo web. So here's a piece of fabric. You just iron this Bondo web onto the back of your fabric, and then you can take the bit of paper off, and you've got this glue stuff left on. And I have here another example. If you look, the glue is like this, if you can see. This is a bit of glue that's coming off. And then you just plonk that on your fabric, iron it on, and you've got a shape that you can then stitch round. So if we could have, please, images 1 to 11, Jean, if you could work through them. This is just to let you see the sorts of things that I like doing, the sorts of things that I like quilting. So here, image 1, thank you. This is just a quilt that I made from really scraps of batik. Thank you. Could we have image 2?
Sorry, it just froze for a moment, but
that's okay.
It will work.
So I must apologise when you do see image 2, my iron, which is an important thing for a quilter, packed in on me last week when I was doing these pictures, and I tried to iron everything and make it look really nice, and it just wasn't going to work. So as you can see, this is a quilt that I made, and in fact I did do a bit of applique on it and a bit of embroidery on it. If you could move on to image 3, please. So this is a close-up of the sweet violet. And if we could have image 4, thank you. And that's just forget-me-not that I put on the quilt. And if we could have image 5, please. So this is another quilt that I designed. It's 3 different seashore scenes. And if we could have the next image, please. So this is a close-up of one of the scenes, some women bathing on the beach. And if you can see, I'd actually put sea on it. It's a technique called Bargello that I had used. And there's a mermaid in the water. And we could have the next image, please. I think we're on 6. Oh, that's a lady with a ball. I find circles really difficult to do. But you can see the detailed quilting on that one. Next image, please. So that was a lighthouse that I did, and there's fish swimming in the sea. So this is all part of the one quilt, but the different scenes that I did on the quilt. And could I have the next image, please? That's just more detail. And the next image, please. And that was how I, up the sides, just some other bits that I'd appliqued on. And I think that's the last image. So this is, it's a mini quilt, and it's just to show you that I do a bit of Judaica as well. Thanks for that. And this is actually the little mini quilt that I've got here. And these are very common in America. The Americans call them mug rugs. And I make them for Hanukkah, and it's so that you can put your mug on it. And there's just another example of a mug rug that I made. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about what I do in my spare time. So we'll move on now to the Aberdeen Mantles. In August 2017, Aberdeen Synagogue was flooded, and we had 100% moisture in the building. And the Sifri Torahs had to be taken to a place of safety. We have 4 in total. And when we took them out the show, the covers on them were traditional velvet covers. They had been used by the Aberdeen community for the better part of 70 plus years, and they absolutely stank. They were damp and they smelt. And as ever, Aberdeen has never got any money, and we didn't have the money to replace the quilts, replace the mantles. So as I have done some Judaica over the years, I've made, apart from doing the quilting, I did some white work, matzah covers, and I've done gold work yarmulkes, I've done challah covers, other things. The president of the synagogue in Aberdeen said, would you take on making us a new set of Torah mantles? And I said, well, yeah, okay. Could we have image 1, please, for the mantles? So this is the Ark in Aberdeen Synagogue, and I will publicly thank Linda Martin for the Parochet that we have. Linda very kindly made this curtain for us. And could we please move on to images 2 and image 3? Thanks. So this is image 2. So this is the Ark closed. So I not only was asked to make the Torah mantles, I was also asked to make a new bima cover. And this is the bima cover that I made. It includes the names of every person that donated money or volunteered to help us during the time of the flood. And can I have the next image, please? And this is a picture of all the new mantles that I made for the Aberdeen community. So how did I actually make the mantles? So I had to muster everything I'd learned way back when I'd studied home ec, and start off by doing some research about Torah mantles, because I must admit that whilst I think Torah mantles, there are some lovely Torah mantles around, it is not something that I knew very much about. And I certainly, when I went online, had problems finding patterns for Torah mantles. So could I please have image 4? So in my books, and I don't know, behind me you can see I've got lots and lots of books. I have this book called Jewish Ceremonial Embroidery, and I found it really, really helpful. And together with my stash of fabric, I was able to start thinking about how I would go about actually designing the mantle. The president of the synagogue was telling me that the sleeve that makes up a Torah mantle is actually difficult to put on and take off the mantle when it is being used. Could I please have the next image, image 5? So in Jewish ceremonial embroidery, and this picture is taken from the book, I read that the mantles are actually a dress. That the Torah mantles should be a dress. The Torahs themselves are considered to be female, and they are to be dressed as if they were a bride. So there is no limitation as to what you can do in terms of decoration on the actual mantle. And as you can see from this picture, this design would make it a lot easier to fit on the Torahs than the sleeve. Could we please see image 6, 7? Yeah. So here I've taken a picture of the end of one of our scrolls in Aberdeen, and as you can see at the end of the Etz Chaim, they fold over each other. Could I please have the next image, image 7? So this is looking down on it. If you can see again how these scrolls fold over. Can I have image 8, please? And this is another set of scrolls from Aberdeen, and you can see they look different, and they're actually much smaller. The Etz Chaim on these ones are smaller than the Etz Chaim on the other set. And could I have the next picture, please? And again, looking down, you can see that they fold over. So I had to work out how to design the top of the mantle to take into account the Etz Chaim and the fact that they are rolled throughout the year. So each week as you roll the scroll, you're going to have a different weight on the scroll. One side's going to get larger and one side's going to get smaller. Could we please have the next image, image 10? So I came up with these patterns for the tops of each one. And as you can see from the pattern, each pattern is slightly different. And the shape at the top on each one is slightly different, or slightly different size or circumference, to allow for the movement of the Etz Chaim. And I have, could we have the next picture, please? Yep. So here it shows you how it eventually landed looking up, or looking. And what I decided to do was throughout, we have the 4 scrolls. So each scroll, I did the top on each scroll the same. And I bound all the mantles with this fabric that is tartan, just to tie it in with Scotland. And can we have the next picture, please? I think it's image 12. So just there's a close-up to let you see the quilting that I did on each one. Now the difficulty with the design of the top of the mantles was they had to take the weight of the fabric that was hanging from them. So I came up with this idea of not only creating this sandwich that I showed you, but within the sandwich, I put in a stiffener. Now, my brother lives in America, and what we work is we have this system. The fabrics in America, they're just amazing, the quilting fabrics. And I get some fabric delivered to his house, and then he goes and visits my father who lives in Israel. And then I go to Israel to visit Dad, and I pick up the fabric. Or my brother comes to Scotland to see the rugby in Edinburgh, and he brings the fabric, and I go and meet him in Edinburgh, or he comes and visits us up in Afford. So at some point, somewhere along the line, I had discovered what's known as Peltex, and it's quite difficult to get in the UK, and if you do get it in the UK, it's really difficult, it's really expensive. So I'd had some of this Peltex, Pellin, delivered to my brother, and he delivered it to me, and it's it's absolutely fantastic in that it's a really, really thick. So I filled my sandwich with this Peltex as well, and that is what helped to make it rigid. Can we have the next picture, please? So here we have just, it's one of the covers. It's again, this is fabric again, this Fenical Judaica in, I think she's in Florida. She designs her own fabric and it's all got a Jewish theme. And this is just some of the fabric that I had in my stash. So it's just to show you what one of the covers looked like close up. And can I have the next one, please? The next, not sure why I put that one in. Again, it just shows you the top. So if we could have the next one, please. This shows you some of the quilting that I did on the mantles. Now, as I said, the mantles can be really, really fancy and you want to dress them up because the Torahs are a bride. And I therefore wanted to make sure that the backs of the mantles had something on them as well as the fronts. I didn't want to leave them plain. So this is quilting that I did on my machine as, actually I embroidered it, it was embroidered on. It's not a pattern that I designed myself, but it's one that I rather liked. And can I have the next picture, please? I'm losing track. So here you can see what I did, and you can see the wrap over to make it easier to take the mantle on and off. And can I have the next picture, please? So this is the mantle that I made for our small Torah. And when I was doing my research, I wanted to include the tribes on one of the mantles, because if you look at Torah mantles, the tribes are included consistently. And in the research that I did, I was hoping that there would be some consistency in terms of colour, so that I could say a specific tribe was a specific colour. But there was no agreement. So that was why I just decided to choose the colours for the embroidery that I did. It was just random. I decided I liked these colours, and that's why I chose them. And can we have the next? So this is the back of this mantle, just to let you again see the fabric that I used. And if we could have the last picture, please, for the mantles. So this is just one of the set that I also did for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So I did a full set for throughout the year, and I've done a full set for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But again, because we're limited to time, I didn't want to go through each one individually, but it's just to give you an idea. The ones these ones I made from silk, and I've done different embroideries on the front of each one, but made them look quite simple. I didn't put much detail or much design on them. So, come the end of winter of 2018, I had made my Torah mantles, made my bima covers, because I also made a bima cover for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and basically went back to doing what I like to do, and was very much enjoying my quilting. It's a great hobby. I never get bored doing it. I'm not good at following patterns. I like to design what I make myself, and I quite like to do quirky stuff as well, or what I consider to be quirky stuff, and done a bit of knitting as well. And that then takes us to March 2020, when we go into lockdown. In terms of lockdown, well, I thought, great. This gives me a chance to actually sit down and sit for 8 hours a day if I want, plus, and produce what I want, and it'll give me a time to catch up on what quilters call UFOs, unfinished objects. Could we please have image 1 for lockdown quilting? So here we have one of the quilts that I was able to finish during lockdown. This quilt began out as a 365 challenge, whereby you did a piece of patchwork every day for 365 days of the year. Now, I began this quilt in 2017, and the mantles and the beamer covers got in the way of my doing a piece of patchwork every day. So in fact, in the end, I didn't land up doing 365 squares every day. However, I'm quite pleased with the result. Could we have image 2, please? So here's another quilt that I finished during lockdown, and this is just called a scrappy quilt. This was just scraps of fabric that I wanted to use up, and it was just a nice bright, I think a nice bright happy quilt. I also finally got round to finishing for a table runner. I just need to do the binding on it for Hanukkah. So that was another thing that I did during lockdown. But whilst I was busy doing all this, and I said I was quite enjoying lockdown in terms of my sewing, I was actually quite annoyed. And what was making me annoyed was the fairly selfish, what I consider to be the fairly selfish behaviour of the British public. I was supposed to have been going to Israel in March of this year for the better part of a month. And my husband, who works in the oil industry, was off to some exotic locations. He was off to, I think, Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. And basically, he wasn't going to be at home through March, April, and May. So I had no food in the house. And I think the very day we went into lockdown was the day I was supposed to have been flying to Israel, and the flights weren't cancelled till literally the last minute. And when I went to do some shopping, to go and get some food, there was absolutely nothing in the shop. The shops in Tesco's had been absolutely emptied, and our local co-op, I live in a village, had no food in it. And of course, there was no toilet roll. Not that I was concerned about toilet roll, I might add, because I shop in Costco's and generally have a stack of toilet rolls. So I thought, right, I want to do a quilt. I want to do a lockdown quilt. But before I do the quilt, I'll go and do my bit of research, as I always like to do a bit of research and see if this has already been done. And I wanted to do a toilet roll quilt. And I didn't find anyone who had actually done a toilet roll quilt. What I did find was a pattern. Don't know if you can see it. It was produced by Java House Quilts, and they'd come up with this quirky pattern where they had a toilet roll and an empty toilet roll, which you could use to make a quilt. So I thought, well, okay, it's a start, but it's not actually what I want to do. So I went online and I just actually downloaded pictures of toilet rolls. I've got another one, it's another toilet roll. and another toilet roll, and another toilet roll. And I came up with my own patterns. And can we have image 3, please? And this is what I produced. So I produced my lockdown quilt. So it's a humorous quilt, but it's got a serious message on it. And I actually have it here. Oops. So this is my lockdown quilt. And what I did was I put some quotes on it that I had come across by a psychologist. And this psychologist was called Miss Kelly. And she said, toilet paper, a symbol of general panic. It's ridiculous, Miss Kelly said of the panic buying behaviour, particularly of hoarding loo rolls. And we have become an uncaring and selfish society. It's all me, me, me. And I also applied onto it. It was on the 25th of March 2020, I went to the John Hopkins website. And what John Hopkins do is day by day, they look at where the virus is, and they have a black background, and on that black background in red, they have red dots to show how much virus there is. So I downloaded the picture and I purposely made it look not actually very nice. I purposely made the quilting not actually very nice. So I have, for perpetuity, I have put into my quilt what the virus was looking like worldwide on the 23rd of March 2020. And I believe, Fiona will keep me right, what I want to do is raffle the quilt actually to raise money for the Aberdeen Shul. Just as we went into lockdown, or in February of this year, just before lockdown, we had the builder come to the synagogue, come to the shul to repair the chimney. And when she went up, or the builder is a woman, when her tradesman went onto the chimney, they had a look at the roof and they came back to us and they said, you know, your roof's rotten. It's so rotten, it's a danger to yourselves in the building and it's a danger to the public passing in the street. You're going to have to get this repaired. And we said, ooh, okay. How much will that cost? £40,000. And by the way, the back wall of the building's falling down as well. So we had no choice but to take out a bank loan to get the work done. We had to get the work done, and we've worked hard during lockdown, and we've actually managed to raise about £20,000. We still have around about £18,000 worth of debt. So we're busy working on how we pay that debt off. So I'd like to raffle the quilt, and I believe it's being raffled as part of Scottish Interfaith Week. It's going to be raffled then.
Yeah, we've put the link in the chat.
Okay.
We've got a concert coming up on the 8th of November, and each ticket bought will be an entry into the raffle for the lockdown quilt, or you can just pay to go to the concert and then not go to the concert, or you can just donate to Skojek and put a note in saying it's going to Aberdeen, and that will be an entry into the lockdown quilt and a donation for the Aberdeen room. And
I haven't been able to follow the chat whilst I've been talking, but I see somebody has just said they think the quilt should be in a museum. I've had that, a lot of people have said that from me, that they think the quilt should be in a museum. What I'm working on, I've got this idea in my head, and that's as far as it's got, is I'm going to do a masked quilt. I do have some faces. I've gathered together some what are called foundation piece faces. So my next lockdown, because I'm sure we're going to be back in lockdown. I'm being negative, but so I'm going to do another lockdown quilt, and I will do faces with masks on in that one. And I think I need to be quiet now. Yep.
That was amazing and perfect, and amazingly perfectly timed. Thank you. So, thank you so much, Debbie. I'm going to gallery view if you take the spotlight off for a sec. And if I'm just going to scroll through. If anybody's got comments, questions, we can take 2 or 3 before we pass on to our next speaker. Put your hand up, like your actual hand, like that, and I'll have a look in the images to see if anybody wants to talk to us. Can't see anybody. The other way of putting your hand up is if you go to the participants page, you can put there's a little hand at the bottom, and you can put a little blue hand up in the participants list if anybody wants to talk. Or apart from the fact that people are saying in the chat that we must put this quilt in the Dundee V&A. Fascinating. It belongs in the V&A so everyone can see it. How appropriate it is. You've just had some fantastic comments in the chat.
Linda's asking, do you have a long arm? I would love to have a long arm. I just don't have the space. And this is a big secret, but we're looking for another house that's got a garden in it or a room in it where I can have some space to be able to get a long arm quilt.
I'm going to save the chat for you.
Sorry?
I'm going to save the chat for you after this, and you can take it home and take it away and frame it with the most beautiful comments in the chat.
Thank you.
Absolutely lovely. Let me just mute people for now at this sec. Mute or unmute yourself, Debbie.
Oh.
Unmute yourself. Thank you so much, Debbie, for coming and doing that beautiful, wonderful presentation, and for the offer of the quilt in a raffle. And if anybody would like to pursue the V&A idea and go and do it for us and let us know. In the meantime, we're raffling it, so we can always change that if you get it donated to a museum, if somebody does the work to get it donated to a museum for us. In the meantime, I'm going to post again in the chat a bit further down the link for the concert and raffle. So it's a concert performed by Dr. Deborah Nemko of Bridgewater State University, an international concert. She has done the most beautiful research project. It's called Music in the Time of Anne Frank, and she's researched music that was composed by people who perished in the Holocaust. And it's the most, she did this concert live in Arran last year. Now she's going to be doing it in a house concert for 30 people, and now she's going to be able to do it for 1,000 people in our big Zoom room. So thank you so much again, Debbie. If you all unmute and give her a big round of applause, that would be great.
Yay.
Well done. So now we can mute everyone again somehow, like that. And then I need Malcolm and Marsha to unmute, and we are going to spotlight Malcolm, just Malcolm for the moment. And I am very, very pleased to have with us Malcolm Lochhead, who's Professor Emeritus of Visual Design at Caledonian University. And I'm going to just show you a few examples of other things that he had done before we go on to the main activity and the main event today. So let's start. So we've got, are we seeing this? This is some of Malcolm's work. The tomb cover of St MUNGO, Glasgow Cathedral, Glasgow embroidery skills, 1972. Keeping Glasgow in stitches with the people of Glasgow and the world. Streams of living water at St John's Church in Paisley. Stately dance. 12 chairs for the moderator of the Church of Scotland with Edinburgh embroiderers guild. I'm going to go back to that. So I hadn't noticed there's a Jewish star in there. Aha. An altar cover for the Chapel Royal at Stirling Castle. Cloth of estate at Stirling Castle, along with specialist embroiderers. Thoughts hanging at Maggie's Centre in Glasgow with Glasgow Embroiderers Guild. And there's a really fascinating story in that when we get onto the chat at the end of the morning. The Chapel of St Margaret of Scotland in Durham Cathedral with the Durham broderers. Here's another mantle. This is the Torah mantle that Malcolm made for Giffnock Synagogue. And here is a press cutting that brings us on to our main event and main story, which I'll let Marsha introduce. Thank you. So I'm going to spotlight Marsha now.
What can I say?
And here. So we're going to we'll hear back from you, Malcolm, in a moment, because this is Marsha's story to introduce.
Good morning, everybody. It's really lovely to be here. So Malcolm and me, our wonderful friendship and our meeting of each other began, I think it was in 2008, when I was looking for a way to memorialise Bonnie in our local shul, our synagogue in Giffnock, because that's where Yoni spent a lot of his time. It was very dear to him, and he was very dear to the Glasgow congregation, and we felt we wanted to have something for everyone to see and for everyone to remember. So we decided on a Parochet, which is the cover for the ark in the show, and I had this idea in my mind. I would like to have the outskirts, the silhouette of the city of Jerusalem. That was my idea, and I had this when I was visiting Israel. We tried to find somebody who gave us a few sketches, and nothing seemed quite right. And then I had the idea of phoning Risha Friedman, who I've known all my life really, and Vivian Strang, who both I knew were two wonderful artists and worked with textiles and probably other mediums I'm not aware of, but I just knew that they were very talented. And I phoned and asked if I could go and have a chat with them. So we were sitting in Risha's beautiful sitting room at that time and having a cup of tea, and I was saying, you know, really, would you be able to, the two of you together, because I knew that they were just worked at such a tremendous level and that they were very talented, could you make this Parochet for me? And they both looked at me and they said, do you any idea how much work is involved in such a thing? And I said, no, I really don't. And then suddenly, one of them, I can't remember which one, said, I think I know the perfect person. Who was it, Malcolm? Who actually? And they jumped up and phoned you. Was it Risha or was it Vivian? You've muted yourself. Can you unmute?
I think it was Vivian.
Right. Vivian has since passed away, sadly, and is so greatly missed by us all. So it was Vivian. She said, I think I have this, just the perfect person. And she phoned you. She phoned Malcolm and they had a wee chat, and she said, here, take the phone. And so Malcolm said to me, "This sounds very interesting. I think you mean a Parochet." And as soon as he said that, I realized this is somebody who really knows what's what, apart from the tremendous recommendation. And I really felt just we found our man. So that's how it all started. And then Malcolm put together, he came to visit me. We had long talks. He wanted to know all about Yoni, the type of person that he was, and see photos and all sorts of memorabilia about him. He wanted to understand the sort of person that Yoni was. And then he went away and he put himself to work with his tremendous heart and his great brain, and he came back a while later with this wonderful, what he called his rationale. So I'll hand over to you, Malcolm, and you can see. I don't know if I'm main screen because I'm seeing the back of somebody's wall at the moment. If you and am I on the main screen, or Malcolm?
You're on the main. You and Malcolm are both on the main screen. If you
Okay, that's fine. Malcolm, do you want
Well,
to?
perhaps what I should say was when I was a student, I worked for 3 summers in a summer camp in America, which was a Jewish summer camp, and I absorbed a fairly large amount of my understanding of Judaism, which has always fascinated me. And of course, when I was talking to Marsha, my heart was leaping. This is something I wanted to do because not everybody gets to do it. And what I should also say is that I was so wrong for this job because A, I'm a Gentile, and B, I'm gay. And anyway, that didn't actually seem to matter. And so what I learned about Yoni, and I've said to Marsha on many occasions, I said, I still weep for the boy I never knew. I still get emotional about the whole thing because it was truly, truly phenomenal. So there's a television program called A Mother's Journey, and it's one of the most harrowing things I've ever watched, and it's about Marsha going to Israel and then on to Palestine. But Yoni's cousin describes them. They were going to study yeshiva they were in Jerusalem, and they were late for their bus, and they ran for the bus. Yoni was in front, and he vanished into the shadow. And of course, he got on the bus and eventually met his destiny. But it was this thing about the light, and everything I'd learned about Yoni was that he seemed to affect everyone he met. Marsha's mum, Mrs. Black, I call her my Bubala, I called her my Bubala. She gave a lunch for, I think it was about 50 people, and people talked to me and told me about him, and he just seems like he was a marvellous young man. And of course, having worked in university, I've met many, many young people, but nobody seems to have quite the magnetic personality that he did. So if I can remind you, he ran from the light into the shadow. And what I thought was, when you stare into a bright light, there's a vivid after image left on the back of your eyes, in your brain. And I thought, that's what he's done. He has left an image on the show, on his friends, on his family, and people like myself who'd never met him. And so I studied images of what light does. And I'm not a scientist, I'm not an academic, actually. I've always referred to myself as a designer who teaches. And but I saw these fabulous images of light spinning and spitting and doing all the wonderful things that it does. So I decided that on this curtain there would be an image of light. Johnny's after image. And I'm sorry, tears are pouring down my face. I showed the design to Marsha, but the other thing was that what fascinated me was that all of the Torahs had the most amazing. My partner always says that the more I wave my hands about, the more expensive I become. Wonderful, wonderful silver crowns and breastplates and little hands that run along, which I should know what they're called, but I don't.
Yeah.
And sorry?
Called a yad.
A yad.
The point.
Right. Thank you. You can give me one for Christmas. Oh, so Hanukkah. What fascinated me was they were so beautiful in themselves, but they were always covered up. But my understanding was that they have to be protected from the outside. So what I did was, the number 12 is very important in Judaism, not least of all because of the 12 tribes. So I had 12 panels, but between each panel, a little strip of translucent fabric. This is the most beautiful knitted fabric. So that just between the panels, you can see the glitter from the silver. And Marsha and I, as she said, we had so many conversations, and they harvested his organs. So sorry. And she said, I couldn't let them have his eyes. And I remember saying, I absolutely understand, eyes, the windows of the soul. And here was this curtain protecting the knowledge of the Torah, which we could see just glittering through these panels. And I thought, it has to have an eye in it, not an ugly big winky eye, just a symbolic eye. So we look through the eye into the knowledge and understanding of the Torah. And round about it is a swirling light, and swirling round about it are jewels, which represent the jewels of the 12 tribes of Israel from the breastplate of the high priest, which has always fascinated me. And what we did was the 12 panels were very, very lightly printed. And then I had 13 embroiderers, which they had to audition for it. You can only have people whose work is of the very, very highest standard to do something like this. And so over the very faint printing, they embroidered in white silk, and they'd all gone away and they came back and they had all done what I call tight embroidery. And this was wrong. I wanted it where it had to swirl, it had to flow. And it was being embroidered in white silk, mixed in with some other things to give it a bit of a glow, so that when the spiral spiraled, the light would catch it in different ways. And one lady, the show, as you can see, is actually visually quite a busy kind of place. So it had to be something that was pretty powerful, that would be eye-catching. So if you look to the image on the right, you can see the light swirling about in the background, and the 12 tribes jewels, the jewels of the 12 tribes, sort of represent the Jewish diaspora, because they are also swirling and moving out from the center. And you can see the symbolic eye, which it actually opens when the curtain opens, because well, one thing I have to say, because it is really very funny, I had always imagined that it would open quietly and gracefully, because it opens as a concertina. And the day that it was first seen in the synagogue, I wasn't prepared for the fact that the gentlemen who were chosen for that day to close and open the curtain, it was flying at 90 miles an hour like this. And I thought, it will never last. So I think we've put a ton weight on the cord, so it's very difficult to make it move quickly. But I have so much ignorance. I said I know quite a lot about Judaism, but I also have so much ignorance, and I'd never seen a curtain like that opening before.
Can I just interrupt and say, when Malcolm walked into my house with this, and actually I'll show you, he walked in with this, what he called his, what did you call it, Malcolm? Your interpretation. And I don't know, can you all see? I've had it framed, and that's on the wall in my room. I thought to myself, this isn't the outline of Jerusalem. What on earth is this man on about? For goodness sake, this is not really what I had in mind at all. And because we hadn't really discussed what he was going to do. So, but my husband, Jeffrey, caught on immediately. He just knew that this was something really very special and wonderful. And as Malcolm explained, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 signs of the zodiac, and the color of each circle of each of the 12 jewels that the high priest had in his breastplate, they all came together. And the beauty of it, you can't really see from these pictures that each one of these little circles is the most beautiful piece in itself, with the embroidery and all the shading of the embroidery and the gold around it and silver, and also the jewels, Swarovski crystals sewn into it. It was just absolutely magnificent. So I just
I would like to mention Rabbi Reuben at this point, because he came to see the design, and I think he got it. He was fascinated by the fact that you could catch sight of the glittering Torah through the curtain. He liked that idea of going through the eye to the knowledge of the Torah. And basically, I also think he was possibly a little suspicious of me for the reasons that I said earlier. But now I consider Rabbi Reuben to be a friend. And when I did the Torah cover, I went along, and I've actually got the little model of it here, and he had his head on his hand like this, and he was looking at it, and he was smiling. I could see he was smiling, because it's very difficult when you present a design, because sometimes people can absolutely not like what you've done or not understand. It's only ever happened twice. Once was a complete and utter washout, and that was my misunderstanding. But the other was a group of 12 chairs for Glasgow Cathedral, and there was a woman on the committee, and she really didn't like them, and that was it as far as she was concerned. So I was given 3 months to go away and bring the designs back, look proper, as it were. And so what I did was, they sat in the studio for 2 months and quite a lot of days, and then I changed the colours of the mounts and took them back. And all of a sudden they loved them. It was the colours of the mounts that had put them off. Anyway, Rabbi Reuben, he was looking like this, and then his eyes came up and met mine, and he said, I love it. It's so clever. And you can't have a better compliment than that, I think. I've got a little poem in front of me which I couldn't read to you because, well, you can see how emotional I am. That has a lot to do with the fact that I've not been well, my emotions
You're
are.
always emotional, Malcolm. It's what I love about you, is that you're always emotional.
My partner Hans says, you know, I should really stop telling sad stories because I always end up in tears.
But just before you let everybody see or you read the poem, when Malcolm came with this to tell us, you know, present us with his rationale, he didn't just have this presentation which I showed you that I have framed. He had written a piece all about Yoni as a person, how he understood him, and then it finished with this beautiful poem, and it was just beyond moving. So it was just so lovely.
Yeah, actually the poem, and maybe you'd like to sort of Google it if you don't know it, because I swear to you I can't read it, but it's called The Lads in Their Hundreds by A.E. Houseman. And basically it's about the young men who went off to the Great War. And it says here, and many the handsome of face and the handsome of heart, and few that will carry their looks or their truth to the grave. And that is the level, the depth of the emotion all the way through this poem. And that's what I felt about Yoni. And then one could talk with them friendly and wish them farewell, which many people didn't get to do. Marsha didn't get to say farewell to her son, and watch them depart on the way, and they will not return. Stop it, Phil. I'm killing myself here.
Maybe Malcolm, you can tell how you came to the ladies, the embroiderer guild, the ladies, how you decided to actually do it.
We have at least two of them here as well who can talk about the process. But so first, how you found those people, Malcolm?
There are embroiderers guilds in just about every major town in Britain and around the world, and every chairman of every embroiderers guild is terrified of the fact that I might phone them and say, I've got a project in mind. And it was the Redfordshire Embroiderers Guild that Risha and Vivian were members of. And so they got together people who came and, you know, brought examples of their work. And then there are other people that I've known forever. And I know that one of them is here because I saw her writing rude comments. And that's Liz Bolton. And Liz Bolton and I go back forever. And there are people, I'm not technically gifted. I wasn't taught to sew. I can sew. I can't sew fancy like what some people can. So I have people all around me who will rescue me. And Liz is one. And there are Katrina and Linda, Katrina Pretzel and Linda Burke. And it was they who made up the Parochet. And I've always said that they're like the curtain fairies. They make things that look as if, well, there's never a stitch visible, and they made them up. And I don't know who the other person who's with us today. I saw Liz, but can you tell me who it is? Anyway. The length and breadth of the land, there are people who are technically brilliant, but often absolutely terrified of design. So when somebody comes along with a design that they understand and can communicate to the sewers, they give it their magic by sewing it in a particular way. And very, very occasionally, things will go wrong. And when the very first image that was shown of my work was the tomb of St. Mungo in Glasgow Cathedral, and that was in 1972. I was just out of art school, and it was the first big commission I got came my way. And it was the Glasgow Embroiderers Guild. And I thought these were the goddesses of embroidery, which in many ways they were. And I took my design along, and every time I passed the house in Bearsden where I took the the design. Liz, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Have I said bad things about you? What's that?
That's the picture of the design
Ah,
We
yeah.
all
that you
got-
gave us.
Everybody, that's right. You remember, we presented everybody.
Yes. And there you
So,
go, Marsha. That's one of your gifts to us.
Oh, you still got it.
I've still got it on my keys.
Oh, I gave everybody a keyring that had the 12 jewels of the high priest's breastplate on it.
mhm. We're jumping about a bit at the moment,
Sorry.
but the day in the Christian church, it would be called the dedication. I don't even know if it had a name. The day that the Parochet was first shown publicly, there was a Kiddush afterwards. I always have to get the difference between Kiddush and Kaddish, and I do know the difference. I spoke, and people. I went to a school not far from where the synagogue is, and people sort of popped out of the woodwork that I hadn't seen since I went to school and chatted to me. And then we had the most beautiful lunch in the show, but not in the show, in the hall next door to the show. That's the washing machine in the background, in case you hear it. And
I remember all the ladies of the Embroiderers Guilds had come to Shul that morning for the service to join us for the Kiddush for lunch.
yeah, and I know I'm not breaking any confidence when Marsha looked across the table and she said, "I love you," and I said to Marsha, "And I love you," and it's true. We just adore each other. And then I turned to Jeffrey, Marsha's late husband, and said, "We're having an affair," and he said brilliantly, "Who's doing the catering?" Which I thought was lovely. So we've gone right off script now.
Step back. Talking about being off script. While I've got Maureen and Liz there, people are saying.
Was it Maureen who's there?
Yeah.
Maureen's here, yeah.
And so it would be really nice to hear about, some people have been asking in the chat about some detail of the sewing. And you also talked about Marsha doing some of the sewing as well.
Mm. Well, my sewing was on one occasion. I didn't want to do too much in case I ruined it all. But I sewed in a beautiful Swarovski crystal into the circle that was for the stone that was also represented Yoni's birthstone. Because these are the what do you call the star signs as well. They marry up.
The signs of the zodiac.
Yeah. The 12 jewels on the marry up with the star sign. So that was a very special time for me. And where it was at that point was up in the Caledonian University in the big sewing room, would you call it, on these enormous tables.
Cutting tables.
Yes, it was all made out, and it was really a fantastic, unforgettable experience for me.
One thing that Rabbi Rubin said subsequently was every Shabbat when he looks at it, one jewel in particular will always spark at him. And, to me, that is so very, very important, because we have the diaspora, we have, I suppose, also the Holocaust, the people who were lost, the people who travelled, who went everywhere, and in many instances were punished for being who they were. And, being part of a minority myself, I probably have more empathy than many. And when I went to Berlin, there was the Holocaust Museum, which is devastating. But there was also, for the Romani and for the gays, and I think Germany is trying so hard to atone. And what fascinated me was that whenever the word killed might have been used. It wasn't killed, it was always murdered, which of course is exactly what happened. And I've gone really off script.
But maybe we could hear from Maureen and Liz about actually a bit about how the work that they did. Give you a little break.
Well, if I describe while they get themselves together, the jewels are actually done in canvas work in petit point, in silks and wools, and little bits of metallic thread, because stones often have little bits of gold that go through them, or silver or whatever.
So the question in the chat is, how did you manage the collaboration? Was everybody in one place, or did you take it separately?
It was a bit of a mixture, really.
Let's have Maureen.
So the background was originally a series of strips.
You've gone lockdown blonde.
I don't know what you mean. It's a late onset blonde change. So we had, some of them were in huge frames. The ones that get taken home, it was at least partly who had a really big car to put the frames in to get them home. And some of us worked in groups. So I was with Matty and Isabel. But on the larger strips, the design had been printed, I think it was at Glasgow School of Art.
Yeah.
And it was like the faintest grey on a white background.
Yeah.
And that's when the specs well and truly came out. You had to get just the right light to be able to see it, to actually do the sewing. When we did the jewels, it was the opposite. They were so tiny. I was working with a magnifying glass in mine to see the actual stitches. I think we covered all sort of ends of the size spectrum on it. And then we met maybe once a month when we could see what everybody else was doing to make sure that everything was consistent across the panels.
Yeah. No, basically.
All right. I don't appear to be on screen, but I'll talk anyway. You know me.
Oh, you're on our screen.
Oh, am I? Right. Okay. Yeah, so that was the first time I'd worked with digital printing, and it was very, very faint. So it was white silk, and then Malcolm raided my trimmings box. I've been doing a lot with the ballet, and that was a lot of white, so I'd got some iridescent stuff. And then I think I did 2 of the canvas work jewels. I certainly remember a greeny one. And then was it Mary Duxbury who did all the gold crochet?
Yes.
It was, yes. Actually, it was 2 people doing crochet. One person did the circles and somebody else did the tails. Oh yes, I was about to say Lizzie's boxes, drawers, cupboards.
Don't you talk about my drawers.
Not in public. Are full of such treasure, and she's very generous in finding bits and pieces. When I found a piece of red velvet the other day that I didn't want to buy a metre of velvet. I just needed a tiny little bit, and of course Liz came up trumps.
Well, I've got that was left over from Outlaw King. I did 20 enormous banners. So long as you don't want it wider than that, you can have as much red velvet as you like.
Yes, I try not to.
Okay. We've got...
I was also a participant.
Sorry?
I also helped sew.
Yes, remember you, Risha.
Yes.
And there's another Liz in here as well.
Liz Gibson.
Which Liz is there?
Liz Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
I also have to put my hand up and say that when I was ill, I lost a bit of memory. So it's a good thing and a bad thing.
Mhm.
So, Risha, anything you want to add to tell us about what you remember?
Just how emotional it was to work on the project, and how the great satisfaction I have when I go to the synagogue and I see the curtain hanging there, and I just appreciate how everyone that participated did so with good heart, and it gives, I know it's a sad thing, but it gives so much pleasure to so many people. Not enough people, mind you.
One thing, you know, I've done a very, very large number of these projects involving lots of people, and I do the design and the supervision and the stick waving. But what I also do is I give people ownership. You know, they have made it, and they've done the things that they do. And what popped into my mind just now was when we did Keeping Glasgow in Stitches, it said people of Glasgow, people of the world, was 640 people involved in that, including some, I don't know quite what to call, let's call them other abled children. And they came along, and I asked them to do things, and they did it very quietly. And then the next time they came along, I turned the gas up a little under the flame and made it a bit more complex, and they did it. And then after 4 weeks, they went. And in December, when the banners were revealed, and many of the participants were there, these girls were there, and they were pointing up at the banner that they had worked on. And it wasn't something that had, you know, just gone in one ear and out the other. No, it meant something to them, and they had ownership, and they remembered. Hopefully they still do remember. But, you know, wherever you go, I leave a trail of emotion.
That's what it's all about, and that's what you actually created in the Parochet for Yoni, because all around the outside of the jewels, or the circles, was this push, this after effect of Yoni's energy that will always remain in the world and always remain with all the people who knew him. That was
a lovely way of describing it. Whoosh.
But it was, I mean, that's the shape of it, this silvery thing that goes all the way around it, which we'll see more clearly soon.
Okay, so I think, so I'm going to interrupt this. I'm going to take the spotlight off all of you for just for the moment. And we've got a special little feature, little surprise feature.
Wonderful.
So let's see what's going to happen. So we'll remove the spotlight from all of these people, and you're the last one, remove the spotlight. So if we can just, if everybody puts speaker view on again, I won't be a moment, and we might have something, a little surprise for you, we'll see what we can do for you. Woohoo! So with the wonders of modern Zoom, we have a live stream from Giffnock Synagogue, thanks to Philip Mendelson.
Beautiful.
And we can come as close up as we like.
Oh, I forgot the sequins.
Yeah.
There's a bit of technology involved in there as well, with the heat transfer jewels.
That's mine.
Can you focus? Can you close up and then just stay still for a sec? Wow.
Gosh. Each one is just so magnificent, special.
Keep it still on each one, it looks fantastic.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Oh, you can see the transparent fabric in that one.
So have each of the little centres got images, got different pictures?
They are the actual jewels of the 12 tribes of Israel. I found them. I found really, really good illustrations of them. And I can't remember whether I digitized them or not, or whether people just interpreted them with their own brilliance. Here we go, look.
Oh my word. Oh, it's beautiful.
I was going to say it's magical. Well, there has to be a degree of magic. I mean, many religions don't like the word magic, but something that is very almost you can't put your finger on in my world is
It's magical.
Magic.
And that was your mantle in the middle, wasn't it?
Oh.
Lovely. Thank you so much for Philip for going into the show and doing that.
Yeah.
That was an absolute treat. Thank you so much.
No bother, and thanks also to Michael here, who was the man who pulled the cord.
Pulled it perfectly.
Could I just say something here? Because I had the privilege to be the chairman of Queen's Park Synagogue when Rabbi Sachs inaugurated the stained glass windows by John Clark. And of course, those windows are now here. And there is so much that Malcolm says that echoes what John Clark said about his experience as somebody who wasn't Jewish coming and working. And I'd love to get a discussion going between you all.
Can I on Doors Open Day, the Queen's Park show was to be open, and there was a description of the stained glass, and it said it was like being inside a pearl. And I thought, I have to see what they mean. And I went along, and it was devastatingly beautiful. But what was also beautiful, there was klezmer singing, and we were made incredibly welcome, and there was some very nice baking as well, if I remember right.
Lovely. Is there anything that we've missed out, Fiona, from the notes that you made from the other day? It was just, I can just say that as Yoni's mum, so living with the loss is something, of course, that I live with every day, but I cannot express enough what a project like this and the beauty of it and the caring and love that went into it, that it was such a healing process for me too, and it remains there and will remain there for many, many years to come as just such a fitting memorial for Yoni and such a wonderful thing for me and for all of my family to have there. It's a very, I think it's a whole different aspect to what, like the thing that you did, Malcolm, for the Maggie Centre, for when you do things like that for people, honouring people who've died in different ways, that it creates a tremendous healing for the people that you do it for. And you might not even have thought of it from that point of view, but it's something that I treasure. And every day in my home here, when I walk past this beautiful, representation of it, it's wonderful. I would love to have the Parochet in my home one day. So if it ever disappears, you'll know who's gone and stolen it.
Well, it might be me. I've got that really big window, if you remember.
Yes, so I can thank you again, really. And thank you, Fiona, as well, for having this wonderful idea. And thanks again to all those wonderful ladies, to Risha and to Vivian, Alala Shalom, really for you, because if it wasn't for you two in the first place, this would never have happened.
Never happened.
No, no.
Yeah.
I've posted in the chat the link to the Yoni Jesna Foundation, and the first link is contact us, make a donation, and the second link is just to the foundation itself. And I would really suggest that people go and have a look, at the work of the foundation and see the really fantastic kids young people that they've encouraged and that they've sponsored and that they've helped and that they've encouraged to do the kind of things that Yoni would have done.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Really, it's been lovely. And thanks everybody. Thank you for coming and for being here and giving us, Malcolm and I, the opportunity as well to get together again